What's a parenting method that you believe messes up kids? Story 1. You need to tell your children that you are sorry when you screw up, offer a heartfelt apology when you make a mistake. Don't try to explain away your error. Just sit them down, look them in the eye and say, "I screwed that up, I'm sorry, will you please forgive me?" They will, and they'll respect you for it. Story 2. Parents who never give their kids space or trust them at all. I had a teacher who would say how she'd monitor her kid's cell phone and keep him on a pretty tight leash, albeit in a few years. The kid is currently 4. I don't think I would have grown up to love my parents and be a respectful functioning adult if my parents didn't trust me and give me a little bit of space. Story 3. When parents talk about their kids right in front of them about how they are bad or don't listen or like to give you a hard time, this gives the child a story about themselves that they are a bad child. This leads to more negative behavior because you are giving the child permission to behave that way. It's who they are now. Also, when parents complain that their child is giving them a hard time, what they should say is that my child is having a hard time. Everyone gets frustrated being a parent, but this type of reaction is self-sabotaging. Story 4. Holding children to a higher standard than the adults in the household. My dad could scream, throw things sometimes at us, break things sometimes our things, etc. It would usually be our fault or he would laugh it off as normal dad behavior, but if one of us acted that way there was to pay. He basically got to throw tantrums like a child because it was his house and he was entitled, but if we the children did that we would be punished, sometimes physically threatened, ridiculed, etc. Story 5. Not letting kids ever say no. Obviously, there are certain things parents should make their kids do, eating some fruits and vegetables, going to school, getting vaccinations, etc. But when you never let them say no, particularly to things like hugging an older relative, don't be surprised to find a teenager and an adult who has a really hard time saying no to things they don't want to do. Story 6. Exposure to different foods. If you let your kid eat the same thing every meal every day, then don't act surprised when Hesha grows up and is exceptionally picky. Story 7. Not giving a child boundaries. I've never physically punished my 4 children, but they had boundaries that they crossed at their peril. They are now 4 happy, healthy, respectful, generous and kind adults. They had their moments, but compared to some kids, they didn't cause us that much grief. We're proud of them. Story 8. The what's good for the goose is good for the gander method. When it comes to discipline, it can cause a lot of resentment among siblings. I'm the oldest out of 5, and if one of us got in trouble then all of us got in trouble. My parents believed that by doing this we would try harder to stay out of trouble so we wouldn't get our siblings punished also. It caused a lot of resentment among us, especially towards my middle brother who had ADHD. He tried so hard to stay out of trouble, but he was almost consistently doing something stupid. There was a month where we didn't talk to him because he got our Nintendo 64 taken away. I ended it when he started to cry one night because he believed we didn't love him anymore. Story 9. Belittling their problems. I'm 26 and my mother still does this. She's a teacher with a martyr complex, so she has the hardest, most unappreciated job ever. I stopped trying to voice frustration with my own job, because don't I know how hard teachers have it. She doesn't get a raise either. Sometimes you just want to talk to your mom as an adult and bond about how shitty workplaces can be sometimes without it turning into a match. Arf. Story 10. Ignoring them. I worked at a daycare and there was a little boy who told us how he used to play underneath the deck, and once he walked out of his house and to the ice cream shop, across a busy 6-lane road. He was so sweet but didn't quite know how to interact with anyone, because he was just alone at home. I have a baby now and I get so sad if I leave him to pay by himself for more than 5 minutes. I couldn't imagine that little boy not knowing what that kind of love is like. I left that job before anything was done, but a girl I became friends with there said eventually CPS was called. I hope he gets to be the kid he deserves to be. A lot of people are saying kids entertaining themselves is also a good thing, and I definitely agree. By ignoring, I don't mean giving them space to play alone, I mean neglecting them, overlooking their wants and needs because you couldn't be bothered. Story 11. Avoiding opportunities to show their kids that they are human, and especially so when they themselves were kids. Every time I give my kids a rule or guideline, I explain to them why it exists and give them examples from my childhood and what I learned from it as the rationale. We have a working understanding that my goal in parenting is to do everything I can to help them succeed more and fail less by being honest about my own successes and failures when I was in their shoes. Story 12. Publicly embarrassing your child as a form of punishment for mistakes they may make. It's worse when you don't explain to them what they did wrong, and how to correct their mistakes. Story 13. Empty threats. I can't stand those parents who shout and scream at their kids, the ones who are always moaning their kids are naughty, but they never punish them, they just shout. Shouting does nothing. Ground them, dock their pocket money, confiscate their phone. You need to actually do something. Shouting about it is useless. Edit. I'm getting a lot of people correct me on my phrasing. What I mean to say is shouting doesn't yield any results that are actually beneficial. Story 14. Do not ever push your kids to the absolute limit academically, as in they'll only love you if you do well at school. 95% of the time, they will rebel in their teenage years. Story 15. Parents always texting, worrying where you are constantly. The stress of the impending doom of getting that call from my parents ruined a lot of fun times. Also, my parents always used to brag about how they had no cell phones growing up and could go out all day without talking to their parents, yet, they still were helicopter parents to me. Very frustrating. Story 16. When a child is never disciplined for anything, It'll be your fault when your 30-year-old son spends 15 hours a week describing to a psychiatrist that he was sent to jail at 18 for smearing in the library. Story 17. I remember the day I stopped trying at school. In high school I came first in my class at a biology test. It was a big win for me because I wasn't particularly talented at anything else and I had some real competition in that class. I went home and told my mom about it and she just asked why didn't you get 100%. Took all enjoyment out of my victory. And instead of motivating me as she intended, it made me wonder why I should even bother as nothing I do will ever be good enough, so why waste my time? Story 18. Doing everything for them and not allowing them to learn from experience. It goes from creating sheltered kids to incapable teens who don't have any street smarts, initiative, or sense of responsibility for themselves. I have teenage relations who still have to ask their parents if they're allowed dessert after dinner, leave perishables open and out after using them, and think watching the news on TV is too grown up for them. I could give so many more examples, but I'll leave it at that for now. Story 19. Back in my days when I got a bad mark it was my fault for not learning enough. Now it's the teacher's fault. That's not quite right if you ask me. There might be some exceptions, but not on every test a kid takes. Story 20. Letting your children do anything they like, letting them run around restaurants, not addressing at bad behavior at home or at school, not expressing any emotion to the children, not encouraging or discouraging them, having little interest in how the child is performing at school or their social lives, essentially neglecting the child. This type of parenting is also known as uninvolved parenting. Story 21. Fussing over them too much. Every time they sneeze it's all like the poor dear has the flu, or you see a kid fall over and you can tell it wasn't hard enough to hurt them, but they've got their parents sussed and so make a huge scene so the parents come running to their rescue. When parents do that they are just creating kids who will become neurotic and needy adults. However, I think my parents went a bit too far the other way. I fell hard on my arm at the park once and my mum was like, "You're fine, go to school." The school ended up having to call her and make her take me to the hospital because I was in so much pain. Turns out I'd broken my arm. So yeah, something in between those two is probably the right amount. Story 22. I don't recommend my parents' method. The good old head in the sand. If we don't bring up a topic, we'll never have to deal with it. This was particularly true about, but also dating, making new friends away from home, becoming financially independent, and a whole bunch of other issues that they didn't want to talk about because if you talk about it, then the thing is real. Of course, I eventually learned about all these things from other sources, but as adults, we have a very strained relationship, in part because they refused to talk with me about anything. The rare times they brought up topics, they were never interested in my opinion or experience, just getting their point across and getting out. Story 23. The whole staying together for the kids thing. One of two things is going to happen. Either the kids won't see anything wrong, making their idea of what relationships should be based on a lie. Or they do see something wrong, in which case you've accomplished nothing but potentially lose their respect, and also potentially robbing them of growing up witnessing what actual happiness can look like. Full disclosure, there might be more outcomes than that since familial and relationship dynamics are vastly varied and complex. Story 24. My family, immediate and extended, used to have a habit of always teasing us kids about love interests, people we liked. It embarrassed me so much that I would never talk to anyone in my family about people I liked, and even in high school I never told anyone in my family about the girl I was dating. I eventually started making a conscious effort to include my family in my personal life. They only meant well the whole time. But I'm still a little bit messed up from that mindset of being embarrassed to openly show personal affection for someone or talk about it. Story 25. Dropping your young kids on your older kids. I've got friends my age, early 20s, who watch their younger brother who is 5 now. The mom has done almost no parenting at all, and while somebody in their 20s is perfectly capable of raising a child in theory, this kid is totally because he's been exposed to way too much mature too early, without the proper context to understand any of it. Why have another kid if you're not interested in raising one? Makes absolutely no sense to me. Story 26. Telling them not to use profanity because they're bad words. Just encourages them to be more profane when the parents are not around, so that they'll look rebellious and cool. Children don't want to look stupid, they want to be smart like grown-ups. If you tell them that only grown-ups can use words like that, they'll want to use them even more. When my 4-year-old cousin asked me about swear words, I just told her that they're bad words because she sounds stupid when she says them. That made her go real quiet. Formatting in words. Story 27. Insulting their taste in music. I'm 20 years old and whenever my parents walk up the stairs I turn my music off. I know for a fact they're just going to say, "What is this?" My dad listens to Hazel O'Connor. He has no right on an opinion on my music taste. Story 28. Shout out to my Asians. Putting so much importance on schoolwork and grades. It's important, yes, but I think more important to develop a true sense of well-roundedness, not just joining multiple honors clubs and one sport and one instrument to put on your college application. It's why so many young Asian kids have totally stellar grades in high school and college, and you think they're going to become senators and doctors. But then half of them fizzle out and disappear by age 22, and you wonder whatever happened to Enoch Kim and Joy Chong. Because they never learned how to develop dreams or ambition beyond their grade point average. Story 29. Helicopter parenting. You want a child to grow up to be unable to function in this world. That's the one way to make it happen. You can be involved in your child's life without being up there. It's one thing to be class mom and volunteer when they are in elementary school, but you have to learn to take a step back as they grow older. Want to stay involved? Great, volunteer in middle school, but do it in a way that you aren't in their face. Serve on a committee or something. Same with high school, know their friends, but don't hang out in the living room with them when they are over. Give them space and respect, and for the love of God, let them fail sometimes. Teach them about natural consequences, and help them learn how they can deal with them, fix their mistakes, and move on. Story 30. Freaking out over nudity. When mommy hysterically covers Junior's eyes, OFC, the kid will think the sight of a floppy wiener or female nipple will turn them into stone or SH. Story 31. Stop crying or he'll give you something to really cry about. That inconsistency and lack of structure, and also just straight impatience and moodiness. I easily picked up on the fact that my mom was just being mean and angry at us over her own life, and it made me a highly insecure and non-confrontational individual. Don't bully your kids, and you have to. Story 32. Being raised in a strict religious environment. For sure, I was raised a Jehovah's Witness and I am diagnosed with PTSD currently. The insane amount of stress they put on children to be perfect is just absurd and downright evil at times. Story 33. When parents are extremely harsh in general, on one spectrum, and when parents are extremely lax on the other end, both of those just do not work at all. Story 34. Not believing what your child says for a number of reasons. Wanting attention, faking it, drama queen, ECT will mess them up bad. I have diagnosed mental illnesses, psychosis, major depressive disorder, anxiety, and I can't talk to my parents about it because they never seem to believe me. Screws me over big time still because I depend on them for much needed treatment that I'm afraid to ask for. Edit. In the past few months I've finally gotten help, and my therapist explained my illnesses to them and am finally being medicated. I am now diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, major depressive, borderline personality disorder, and PTSD. Story 35. The all or nothing type of mentality I'm seeing in a lot of parenting blogs. For example, a lot of parents are so against tablets for young kids, because they see bad parenting in others who let their kids have tablets all day for hours without limits, getting them addicted. Instead of all or nothing, teach your kids moderation. My kids have tablets of their own, watches TV, yes, preschool ages, they know how to walk away from TV and tablet to do something else. They play outside, draw, write, enjoy books, read, etc. They can enjoy all those things in addition to electronics. They can enjoy the McDonald's chicken nuggets and french fries too, in addition to fresh fruits and vegetables and home-cooked meal. My kids enjoys eating salads. It's kind of like dropping your kids off at a play date or visiting for family gatherings. They are glued on the TV at someone's house instead of socializing and playing with other kids, because they don't know how to exercise moderation. Story 36. Complaining about how their activities and hobbies impact you. Ugh, I could be watching my shows instead of driving you to karate. I've spent so much on lessons and you've barely improved. I hate having to wash your football kit, my personal favorite, every time I was in the car with my mom, driving to stores or grandparents. Oh, that house looks nice. I'd love to live there away from all of you on my own. Thanks, Mom. Story 37. Raising your daughter as a princess and not making them contribute to the household chores. My daughter's friend was such a princess that when she got to college she had no idea how to operate a washing machine and had never used a vacuum cleaner. My children were taught to help around the house at an early age and to have a fantastic work ethic in the business world now. The princess above still struggles, never finished college and cannot hold a job or relationship for very long. Story 38. I firmly believe following any parenting method 100 screws up a lot of kids. Kids are different, which is why there are a million different ways to raise kids, and they all work, they just don't work for every child. Story 39. I'm right because I am the parent. This mentality, it's lazy, stupid, and ignorant. If you don't want your kid to do something, then give them a legitimate reason. Don't have one, then you're just being in. What's worse is how this still applies in my adult life. My boss has this mentality for his employees. I'm pissed just from thinking about it. Quieting them through the use of electronic games on phones, tablets. This is a detrimental way to address a normal symptom of being a child where they are craving attention, and parents who satiate their children's craving for attention by sticking a phone or tablet in their face are raising some socially dysfunctional children who are just straight-up brats. I've seen it starting with children who can't even talk yet. Story 40. I'm not a parent yet, but I was child. Don't push your kids to do things they don't like. Let me explain. When I was young I was quite nervous of the world outside my house. I was a very anxious child, and overthought so much my dad, doing what he thought was best, pushed me to do things I didn't like. I can see that, from his point of view, it was what he thought could remove my fear, make me stronger, but my dad really chucked me in the deep end. Introduce your kids to things they find scary, daunting gently. Show them that it's not as bad as they think. Help them practice dealing with a life situation, then slowly drop back and see how they do on their own. Make sure it's something that will not scar them for life. Of course, most importantly, see the situation through their eyes. To an adult, going in a shop and buying a sweet isn't a biggie. But your little boy girl might think the whole thing is intimidating. I'm not a parent yet, hopefully one day, be patient, they'll learn eventually. Story 41. Being way too strict. I have a friend whose parents ground him months at a time for getting only a 3 in an incredibly difficult class, or put about as much child locks on all his electronics as possible for not turning in homework. Sure, he's a good kid, but he's a nervous wreck. Another example is my ex-girlfriend. She was caught eating Nutella at 13 straight, and to this day, late 16, She's basically banned from all sweets for as long as can be enforced. And guess what? She has a candy addiction. Both hate their parents, have anxiety and depression, and have every intention to get the out of there as soon as they hit 18 and never look back. Sure, you can be too loose, but it's all on a spectrum, and you should be in the center. Story 42. Actively discouraging your kids from pursuing their interests. My paternal grandparents were very guilty of this, and my dad suffered from depression as a teen because of it. He made sure not to raise us like that. My grandpa married a real grade A aholi, and she had grandkids a couple years behind us. She actually said granddaughter wanted to play the sax, and we all tried to talk her out of it. We were shocked and appalled. My dad even blurted out why. Funny enough, when said granddaughter turned 18, she wanted to join the Air Force, but none of her family would sign the form. Finally she got her rebel aunt to sign and has a military career. Boy did I catch for doing music in college instead of something noble, but thankfully my dad didn't pass all they said down to me. Story 43. Giving children the silent treatment. Hours or days of silence. Trying to make them feel guilty and ashamed, but never actually telling them what they did wrong. Story 44. Helicopter parenting. If you're watching your kids' every move, and controlling them until they're 25 and move out, you're seriously messing them up. A kid needs to fall and scrape their knee or else they'll grow up scared of falling. They also need to know how to go out and learn street smarts. If you never let your kid go out without you, they'll never learn street smarts. If your kid is 18 and you still tell them they can't go somewhere without parents, that is a problem. Sorry if it seems like I'm ranting, that's because I am LMFAO. My girlfriend's parents are exactly like that, and it is infuriating. Story 45. That parents have to be in agreement with each other in all their parenting decisions and always back each other's decisions up. One spouse shouldn't let the other wreak havoc and not intervene, just for the sake of presenting a united front, also that the parent is always right. You should be able to discuss disagreements so the kid learns how to stand up for themselves when conflict happens. The goal is to raise good adults, not good children. Story 46. Only punishing, never rewarding. I grew up getting yelled at, grounded, and threatened for every mistake and bad grade, and never hearing any encouragement or an "I'm proud of you" whenever I did good. I tried for years to please my parents and earn just a little bit of praise, but nothing was ever good enough. I was either criticized or unnoticed, and as a result, in my teens I fell into a deep depression and just quit trying. I gave up on school, which earned me more punishments and yelling, but I just didn't care anymore. Why bother trying when you clearly can't do anything right? It really takes a toll on a kid when they grow up being nitpicked and criticized constantly, and it messed me up well into my 30s. I struggled with depression and cripplingly low self-esteem for decades, and while I'm about 99 over those things, I'm still really sensitive to criticism. I feel hopeless a lot and I cry really easily. It shocks me whenever anyone says something nice to me. I don't really know how to react to compliments. Story 47. When parents brutally make fun of their kids for something and then follow with "Why are you so upset? Don't be so defensive. I was just kidding. You need to learn how to take a joke, etc." Guess how chronic insecurities develop. A joke is a joke. Being a complete and covering it with the facade of a joke is bullying. Story 48. Eat everything on your plate. This messed me up so bad. I had weight issues for a long time because I just ignore being full, because that's what I was taught to do. Right now I'm literally suffering with horrid stomach cramps and bloating because restaurant portions are huge and I ate everything on my plate last night. Story 49. I work for a police department, so we get to see the consequences of bad parenting all the time. Yes, sometimes kids are just little shits regardless of parenting, but we get parents who will call us to come make their child go to school, but the child will not listen. Youngest so far was 9. Luckily the school district police handle this. Or we have parents bring their kid to the police department to scare their kid straight. We do not do this either. This just teaches a child to fear police officers. If you are trying to be your child's friend, you are making a huge mistake. You can be their friend when they are out of your house. They need you to be their parent, not their friend. No one likes to be the bad parent, but sometimes it has to be done. Story 50. Spanking teaches kids that physical violence is an acceptable strategy to use when you aren't getting your way. It's an immature and impulsive way to handle the very important job of teaching kids why they should behave a certain way. I was spanked frequently, and resented it terribly, so now you can't make that blanket claim anymore. Story 51. Overbearing parents that don't give their kid privacy or trust. My mom constantly raided my room and checked my phone and emails and questioned me about everything and would always try to catch me lying. Once I entered college, I had such bad anxiety that I dropped out because I couldn't handle something else going on that was going to be graded and scrutinized. It took me years to overcome the anxiety caused by her constantly meddling and questioning. Story 52. I think parenting methods are the biggest things messing up children these days. Parents need to engage with their kids, be active participants in their lives, talk to them, play with them, read with them, do homework with them, and they will turn out okay. Trying to cram your kid into a tried and true method will screw them up fast. All kids are different. Story 53. Attempting to find something wrong with a chore or something. My mom would always find the one thing I messed up on or did not do, and this led me to just stop doing chores altogether because I knew that they would never actually be praised or rewarded. She was not trying to be mean, I understand that, but she still did that every time I tried to do anything. If I put away the dishes, say, "Wow, good job, you put this one in the wrong spot, but that's okay, thank you," instead of saying, "What do you mean you put away the dishes? This one isn't even in the right spot, haha. Now as an adult I find myself letting things pile up because to me I don't think cleaning them up will actually matter. Like if I wear something, you'll put it in the laundry thing, but I will run out of clothes before I actually do my laundry. Story 54 asking them why they're so quiet and to stop speaking so softly because nobody will take you seriously. Also being at work all the time and assuming that money can make up for the lack of life lessons and neglect. Story 55 anti-authoritative. You don't have to beat kids into oblivion or at all, for that matter, but absolutely no consequences for unacceptable behavior are even worse. Story 56 telling your kids you don't want to have to deal with them being sad or having an attitude, so they have to fake a smile around you or else you'll yell at them or ground them. That just ended up making me never want to talk to my mom about my problems, and only ever speak up when I'm far too angry and don't have nearly as much control over my emotions as I should have, leading to a lot of arguments. Even if you think your kid doesn't have any real problems, if you get mad at them whenever they're in a shitty mood, they are going to be more depressed and not feel like they can talk to you. Story 57 over-encouraging gender stereotypes, traditional gender roles, for example, insisting your son must be the epitome of manliness and making fun of him for doing anything not seen by the father as masculine, then turning around and telling your daughter she cannot wrestle in school despite being better than her twin brother. Parents need to realize kids have to be who they have to be. You can guide but cannot plan out their life, personalities, or simply what they like. Story 58 not allowing kids to have an opinion that differs from yours because anything they think they know or believe is trumped by your anecdotal evidence and experience. I'm not saying any party is right here, but no one learns from just listening to their parents. A lot of times the best lessons are doing things by yourself and falling on your sometimes when it doesn't go your way. You'll never learn if your parents do all the thinking for you. Yes, your parents are wise from experience, but it doesn't mean they're always right and doesn't mean they should strip you of finding your own answers in the world. Story 59 conceding to all of your kids' food requests. This sounds like an ELI 5, but other than allergies, what are the advantages of being a picky eater? I never understand when people say things like, I don't like apples or water, just generally regular foods. Even more, the kids that only eat French fries or noodles with butter, bother the out of me. Story 60 controlling every aspect of their lives and being a helicopter parent, fighting every battle for them, also micromanaging every single play date. Part of a child's development is playing with friends, making up games and creating their own rules. When you micromanage every single part of every play date, you hinder the child's development. You miss an opportunity for them to gain creative skills, problem solve, negotiate, entertain themselves without help, etc. But it seems like every parent today is under the belief that if they don't scour Pinterest for ideas for games and whatnot, that kids will be bored sick. They won't be bored, leave them alone, watch what happens. Story 61 spanking, or any kind of corporal punishment. There's been extensive research on the subject, and all studies have found that spanking leads to neutral outcomes at best, and detrimental outcomes at worst. Don't hit your kids, ever. Story 62 when my son was in pre-K, they had a little art day, and one kid's picture was a couple of crudely drawn, but obviously terrifying monsters, with the caption I love whispering death and monstrous nightmares. Turns out they're dragons from How to Train Your Dragon, but at the time I was really like, this kid is up. Story 63 not taking responsibility when you're the one who screwed up. My mom always blamed me for everything that went wrong. If she left something in the oven too long and it burned, it was my fault for not reminding her. If she forgot my little sister had to be picked up from rehearsal and wasn't home to do it, it was my fault for being at work and not being able to drop everything and get her. One time, she left her camera on the edge of a low coffee table and the dog knocked it off with her tail. That was my fault, because I should have noticed the camera was in a bad spot, and I also should have been watching the dog constantly despite not being in the same room. I've since moved out of town, and even though I live about an hour away and rarely see her, she still blames things on me constantly. What makes it worse is that when she does realize that she screamed at me for no reason, she apologizes by putting on the fakest sweet voice she can and blaming it on her own mother for doing the same thing to her, so she can't help it. For a while I was everyone's punching bag because I automatically apologized every time something went wrong, regardless of whether or not I had anything to do with it. Thankfully I've got a lot of awesome people in my life now and it's getting easier for me to recognize when something that's gone wrong isn't my fault, but I got really lucky with the friends I made after moving away. Don't ever blame your kids for your own screw-ups, and if you do, give them a genuine apology. Story 64 I was part of the first generation in my family to lose the ability to speak Chinese fluently. I have Chinese parents who were schooled in the UK, so they also spoke perfect English. Anyways, around the age 12 to 14, I started to really want to learn how to speak Chinese properly again. Family in general ribbed me a lot for not being able to do so. I ripped Rosetta Stone off LimeWire and everything. I also thought, hey, I have 2 native speakers that I live with, this is going to be great. One day after spending a couple of weeks on Rosetta Stone, I tried to speak to my parents in Chinese. My dad laughed at me and said in Chinese what can be translated as your Chinese is ugly. Better stick with English. I don't think I tried ever again. Edit thinking out loud, I don't really blame my parents. I'm more upset that I gave up as easily as I did. Story 65 if you're going to spoil your kids, spoil them with trust. My parents let me do so many things as a kid, ride bikes to the mall, go get food on my own, etc., that I didn't want to do anything to jeopardize their trust in me. Story 66. This thread forced me to recall how unhealthy my own childhood experience was. Yet for my mother's experience, she was nothing but saintly and I was the problem child. What I did to be a problem, I still don't know. I was shamed from the age of 9, told me I was dressing like a who deserved to get raped when I was legitimately wearing jeans and a form-fitting hoodie and that I was ruining the family name. I was homeschooled and not permitted to leave the house except to attend church for 1 hour. I never had a science class before college even though my father has PhD from MIT and should understand the importance of that more than anybody. I wish I was making that up, but that's what religious delusion will do to a person. Note I converted to a different religion after leaving the house, but there's a difference between believing in a spiritual dynamic to the universe and using dogma as an excuse to bully. I was never told to drink water. I recall being in constant vaginal discomfort, especially during hikes, and I now realize this is because I was dehydrated to the point of amber urine. My brother is turning 18 in August and legitimately only eats fried chicken, fries, pizza, cookies, pancakes, waffles, pretzels and Cheez-Its. I have left nothing out of his food pyramid. That's just how ignorant my parents are about nutrition. Again, they both went to fancy East Coast schools. I feel bad for this brother because he desperately wants a change now, but he will never be accepted by them. The hateful garbage my mother has spewed at him when she even catches whiffs of his preferences are hyperbolic, out of some kind of sadists. As a child, I remember there was a time I went 12 years without a doctor's visit. My dad AMD 250k, we had Cigna, yet whenever I would anxiously bring this up, I would get screamed at. Another common thing, I would be punished for looking miserable. Her personal favorite, how dare you flinch, how dare you act like I abuse you. I didn't get my driver's permit until I was 20 because my mother insisted on driving my everywhere so she could speak to me however she wanted and be complete control of a captive audience. She'd lock the doors on me if she was mad and we got somewhere early and scream at me and humiliate me until it was time to leave. My mother constantly alternated between two modes. One moment she was overly mothery to the point of smothering me like I was an infant, and if I showed any sign of rejection or independence, she was screaming at me at the top of her lungs. Usually for 30 minutes at a time I would keep track about what a worthless I was, how nobody would put up with my nonsense and all my boyfriends and husbands would leave me and I'd die alone. It's very uncomfortable recalling these things, but I have to get it out somehow. Her goal was always making me sob, and whenever that happened, the real cruelty would begin. She'd always tell me nobody would believe me. She monitored my phone constantly, and when she forced me to dump my boyfriend or else she would kick me out of the house on the grounds he was Mormon, I told me friend the situation via text and she lost her mind. She would always mock me as a child, saying her mother was so much worse, that I was weak for crying, and out of fear that I would actually tell people what was actually going on at home, she would say things like, "Oh, are you running to your little friends to talk about how evil your mommy is? They'll never believe you. I'm not the monster here, you are poor little rich girl. You don't know how good you have it. I was such a good mother." Goes on for hours about her rigid parenting tactics and rages at me if I even hint at her not being a good parent, or even that how well I have turned out is not solely hinged on her as a person. The mothery side I described early was what she displayed to everyone else. Most of my childhood is a blur, and I think you can understand why I repress these memories, but I recall a lady at our church approaching me with a confrontational manner and declaring, "Your mother is a very sweet woman." I don't know the context for this comment, but since it's one of my few memories, I've reflected on it quite a bit. I think her thought process was that a bratty child like me could possibly appreciate a mother of that caliber, or that my mother was playing a victim card and inventing random concerns she was afflicted with. How unappreciated she felt. Felt very invalidated being told how kind my mother was by everything but her own conduct. The worst part, I believe, is that this set a precedent for abuse that followed into my dating habits. I had my first relationship with a fat, divorced 25-year-old who used prostitutes, statutorily raped me, and bought me pills to kill myself when he wanted to break up. The most poignant part of the relationship honestly was that when I told him about my mother, he told me she did all those things because she loved me, that he always felt my mom and he would hit it off if they ever met. He's probably right. TLDR, don't be an erratic, abusive egomaniac. Love your kids. Love them so much and show them what that means, or else you set a horrifying precedent that will probably never be reversed. Authoritarian parenting. Effectively, the "you will do what I say because I told you to, or you will be punished" method. There has been studies that show that these people are very task-focused and obedient, but have a far higher chance of depression and repression of emotions.